For more than 3 decades, one airline built its entire identity on a single promise: that flying could be cheap. Not comfortable, not glamorous, just cheap. It sold the lowest base fare it could print, then charged for everything else: the bag, the seat, the water. Millions of travelers who could not otherwise afford to fly flew because of it. Then on May 2, 2026, its planes stopped. Not delayed, not grounded for a day, stopped. A court-supervised order wound the company down and put its aircraft, its airport slots, and its very name up for auction. Spirit Airlines had become the first major United States airline to be liquidated in a generation. This is the story of a company that changed how America flies, survived a bidding war, was saved, and then unsaved by the courts, went bankrupt not once but twice in less than a year, and finally ran out of the one thing no airline can operate without: cash to buy fuel. To understand how Spirit died, you first have to understand what it was, because Spirit was never trying to be a normal airline. Most carriers sell you a ticket that bundles a lot of things together: a seat, a carry-on, a checked bag, a drink, the ability to choose where you sit. Spirit unbundled all of it. It pioneered in the United States what the industry calls the ultra-low-cost carrier model. The idea was radical in its simplicity: advertise the cheapest possible base fare, Spirit branded it the bare fare, and then let passengers pay one by one only for the extras they actually wanted. If you brought nothing and sat wherever you were assigned, you could sometimes fly across the country for less than the cost of dinner. If you wanted a bag, a specific seat, or a snack, you paid for each. To keep those base fares low, Spirit squeezed cost out of everything. It packed more seats onto each plane, flew those planes as many hours a day as it could, and ran a deliberately no-frills operation. The strategy made Spirit a target of jokes and complaints, but it also made flying accessible to people who had been priced out of the sky, and it did something larger. When Spirit entered a route, other airlines were often forced to lower their own prices to compete. Regulators would later give this phenomenon a name. The Justice Department called it the Spirit effect, the downward pressure Spirit's presence put on fares across the market. That effect is the key to everything that follows. Spirit was not just a company. It was, for cost-conscious travelers, a mechanism that kept air travel cheap, which is exactly why what happened to it mattered far beyond its own balance sheet. For years, the model worked. Spirit grew from a small operator into one of the most recognizable low-fare brands in the country, flying a large fleet across the United States, the Caribbean, and Latin America. Its bright yellow planes became a fixture of American airports, and its brand became shorthand for a certain kind of travel. No comfort, no frills, but a price almost anyone could reach. The economics behind that price were unforgiving by design. An ultra-low-cost carrier does not make money the way a traditional airline does. It makes money by keeping its planes in the air as many hours a day as possible, by fitting more seats into each cabin than a legacy carrier would dare, and by turning nearly every amenity into a separate line item that a passenger can choose to buy or refuse. The base fare is bait. The profit lies in the extras. It is a machine tuned for maximum efficiency and minimum waste, and when it runs at full capacity, it can be remarkably profitable. But that same tuning is what makes the model brittle. Every empty seat hurts more. Every idle plane hurts more. There is very little slack anywhere in the system because slack is precisely the cost the model was built to eliminate. For most of Spirit's history, that trade was worth it. Then the environment changed. In the years that followed, Spirit was squeezed from several directions at once. Fuel prices were volatile, labor and aircraft costs climbed, and a manufacturing problem with a widely used jet engine forced airlines around the world to pull aircraft out of service for inspection, grounding planes that Spirit, running lean, could not easily afford to have sitting still. An airline that only makes money when its jets are flying is uniquely punished when its jets cannot fly. Even so, by the early 2020s, Spirit had become valuable enough to spark a fight over who would own it. In 2022, the discount airline Frontier reached an agreement to merge with Spirit, a deal that would have combined the country's two biggest ultra-low-cost carriers. But before that marriage could close, a larger suitor appeared. JetBlue, a bigger airline with higher fares and a very different model, made a competing offer, ultimately a cash deal valued at around $3.8 billion. Spirit's shareholders faced a choice: merge with a fellow discounter or sell to JetBlue for cash. They chose the cash. The Frontier Agreement was set aside, and Spirit agreed to be acquired by JetBlue. It is worth pausing on that decision because it looked entirely reasonable at the time. A merger with Frontier would have created the largest ultra-low-cost carrier in the country, but it was a combination of two discount airlines, paid largely in stock, a bet on a shared future rather than a payout. JetBlue was offering something simpler and more certain, cash and a premium. To a shareholder weighing a guaranteed sum against the uncertainty of a merger, the cash was the rational choice. Spirit's board concluded the competing discount offer was not superior. What almost no one weighed heavily enough was the possibility that the government would go to court to stop the sale and win. The safest-looking exit turned out to depend on an approval that never came. On paper, it looked like a triumphant exit. Spirit's owners would be paid, and the airline would be folded into a larger carrier. But the very thing that made Spirit valuable to travelers made the deal dangerous in the eyes of regulators. If JetBlue bought Spirit, it said it planned to reconfigure Spirit's densely packed planes into JetBlue's roomier layout and charge JetBlue's higher average fares. In other words, the cheapest seats in the market would disappear. And so, in March 2023, the United States Department of Justice, joined by 6 states and the District of Columbia, sued to block the merger on antitrust grounds. The government's argument was straightforward. Eliminating Spirit would remove the discipline that kept fares low for the most price-sensitive flyers. The case went to trial, and on January 16, 2024, a federal judge in Massachusetts blocked the merger with a permanent injunction. The reasoning was about consumers, not politics. The judge wrote that converting Spirit's planes and raising its fares would harm cost-conscious travelers who relied on Spirit's low prices. The elimination of Spirit, the court concluded, would hurt exactly the passengers the airline existed to serve. Shortly after, JetBlue abandoned the acquisition. Here is the pivotal irony of the entire story. The merger was blocked to protect Spirit's low fares and the competition they created. But blocking it also left Spirit standing on its own, a standalone company that was, by then, deeply unprofitable, carrying heavy debt, and facing the loss of the cash payout its shareholders had been promised. The forces that had been squeezing Spirit did not pause. The airline had been losing money. Its costs, especially for aircraft and debt, were rising. An engine problem across parts of the industry had grounded some jets. And the ultra-low-cost model, which depends on filling planes at rock-bottom fares, left almost no cushion when fares softened or costs rose. A company built to have no spare margin now had no buyer, no cushion, and a mountain of obligations coming due. The collapse came in stages, and it came fast. On November 18, 2024, Spirit filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection for the first time. This first filing was what is known as a prepackaged restructuring, a deal largely agreed with creditors in advance. It converted roughly $795 million of debt into equity and moved through the court in about 114 days. Spirit emerged in early 2025 leaner, with less debt, and it hoped. A path forward. That path lasted about 5 months. The problem with shedding debt is that it does not fix an operation that is losing money. After Spirit emerged, its situation deteriorated again. An aircraft lessor moved to terminate leases, and its credit card processor tightened terms in a way that drained the airline's liquidity. On August 29, 2025, Spirit filed for Chapter 11 a second time. Filing for bankruptcy twice in under a year is a rare and ominous signal. It means the first rescue did not cure the disease. Spirit tried again to save itself. In March 2026, it filed a restructuring plan that aimed to cut its debt and lease obligations from about $7.4 billion down to roughly $2 billion, targeting an exit from bankruptcy by early summer. For a moment, it looked like the airline might survive. Then came the final blow, and it was almost elemental. A sharp, sustained spike in jet fuel prices, driven by geopolitical events, hit the airline just as it was trying to stabilize. For a carrier already out of cushion, the surge in fuel costs drove a rapid and unexpected decline in its remaining liquidity. A hoped-for outside rescue did not materialize. By late April 2026, the company concluded there was no viable path to keep flying. Spirit ceased all operations on May 2, 2026. On May 8, 2026, the Bankruptcy Court entered a wind-down order, converting the reorganization into a liquidation. The human cost of that sentence is easy to miss in the language of dockets and orders. When an airline stops, it does not stop gently. Passengers holding tickets found their flights simply gone, their travel plans converted overnight into a scramble for refunds and last-minute seats on other carriers. Seats that, without Spirit's fares pulling prices down, often cost far more than what they had originally paid. Thousands of employees, pilots, flight attendants, gate agents, mechanics lost their jobs as the operation was wound down. A brand that had carried tens of millions of travelers a year became, in a matter of days, a set of assets to be cataloged and sold. For the wider industry, the disappearance of a major ultra-low-cost carrier removed a competitor whose entire purpose had been to keep fares low. The very Spirit effect that regulators had gone to court to protect now vanished not by merger, but by liquidation, the outcome no one had been trying to produce. What remained was sold for parts. The airline began preparing auctions of its most valuable assets, its coveted takeoff and landing slots at LaGuardia, its customer loyalty program, its operating equipment, and its corporate real estate, with bidding running through the summer of 2026. After more than 30 years in the sky, Spirit Airlines was being disassembled and sold to the highest bidders. The end of Spirit is a story about airlines, but its lessons reach into the heart of how modern businesses are built and how they fail. The first lesson is about margin. Spirit's genius was also its fatal weakness. By stripping every ounce of cost and cushion out of its operation to offer the lowest possible fare, it built a company with almost no room for error. That works brilliantly when fuel is cheap, demand is strong, and nothing goes wrong. But a business with no margin for error is a business that cannot absorb a shock, and in the real world, shocks are not the exception. They are the rule. A grounded fleet, a rise in costs, a spike in fuel. Any one of them can be survivable for a company with a cushion and fatal for one without. The second lesson is about debt and time. Spirit's first bankruptcy did exactly what it was designed to do. It cut debt. And it still was not enough, because restructuring a balance sheet does not repair an operation that loses money on the way it actually runs. Cutting debt buys time. It does not, by itself, buy a future. When the underlying business does not turn around, a second reckoning is only a matter of time, and for Spirit that time was 5 months. The third lesson is the hardest and the most human. Spirit's low fares were not just a business strategy. They were, for millions of people, the difference between flying and not flying. The competition Spirit created pushed prices down across the market. Its disappearance removes that pressure. The uncomfortable question left behind is whether the very cheapness that made Spirit beloved was also, in the end, unsustainable, whether a company can price itself so low that it cannot survive its own success. And there is a final, structural lesson. Spirit was saved, briefly, by a bidding war, and then left standing alone by a court decision meant to protect the competition it represented. Both of those things were, in their own terms, rational. Shareholders took the higher offer. Regulators protected low fares. And yet the combined result was an airline with no buyer and no margin, walking into a fuel spike it could not survive. Sometimes no single decision is the mistake. Sometimes a company simply runs out of room, while everyone around it is doing exactly what they are supposed to do. In the end, Spirit Airlines was undone by the same arithmetic it had mastered. It had spent 30 years proving that you could fly for almost nothing. What it could not prove was that a company could keep doing so forever. The planes that once carried millions for the price of a dinner are now assets in an auction, and the cheapest seat in American skies is, for now, gone. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. All information is sourced from publicly available documents, court filings from the U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Southern District of New York, regulatory filings, and credentialed news organizations. Spirit Airlines liquidation is a civil bankruptcy proceeding. This video makes no allegation of criminal wrongdoing by any individual. Source links are available in the description.